very wide hips and breasts and everything like that. And the oldest one so far found is the Venus of Hohlefels, which was made about 40,000 years ago. And I will show you that in a second. They were carved out of soft bone, stone, ivory, or clay, and were actually fired in very low temperatures over a long period of time because it was just like a pit fire, and they would just leave it in there for a long time. So these are some of the most common ones, and they go in order. No. Okay. They go in order like that in age. This is the Venus of Hohlefels. I think it looks like a chicken, to be honest with you. But you can see what I mean about how it's really sexualized. And so they're not sure if that was to depict the female body, if it was for religious reasons, for maybe a goddess of fertility or something like that. It is possible, but we have no idea. That one was made out of ivory. And they're made out of lots and lots of different materials over a span of time. A really interesting one down here, one of the most recent ones, is actually made out of iron ore, which predates the Iron Age. And so that's really interesting because it shows that they were actually working with things like iron before we originally knew that they were. This one here, I keep pushing the wrong buttons. Sorry. This one here is interesting because it's the first ever recorded depiction of the human face. And I like it because it kind of looks like she has a headdress or maybe like braided hair or something like that. But it's very interesting because it shows the face and some kind of something that they were doing with a headdress, which is also artistic expression. And that was still 25,000 years ago. So other figurines that were common, small statues and figurines of animals. Those are less common because they were harder to make. This is swimming reindeer. It's kind of hard to see, but there's two reindeer. One's there and one's there. And they're swimming in a river. That was out of mammoth tusk about 13,000 years ago. This one here is a wolverine. Ones that were really interesting were the, pardon my French, batons de commandement. We have no idea what these things are, but they found dozens of them over a span of thousands of years. And they all look exactly the same. It's a hooked piece of bone or ivory with a hole in the middle. And the closest that we've come to figuring out what they were used for was maybe for straightening a spear when you threw it, or something like that. Because as far as I know, they didn't have bows and arrows yet. But yeah, we really don't know what they're for. Controversial paintings and pieces. These are fun because they're so old or they're so weird that nobody knows if they're actually art or if they're just a rock or something. But like I said before, a classification of art really depends on who you're talking to. And that's still true in modern days. Like, some people might not consider cartoons art. And it works exactly the same for when we're trying to look at pieces that are thousands of years old. The Bimbetka rock paintings are really interesting because these are rock shelters in South Asia that have been inhabited by hundreds of different species and subspecies of humans over thousands and thousands of years. Homo erectus lived there over 300,000 years ago, and they were inhabited up until recently. So a lot of the paintings, it's hard to tell which group they came from. And so a lot of people think that because Homo erectus lived there so long ago, some of the really simple, like line scratches in the walls or something like that could have been from them. The oldest proven art is only about 30,000 years old, which isn't as old as some of the other pieces you've seen. These are Middle Paleolithic Venus figurines, which are classified with the other Venus figurines, but they look kind of silly. And they're very controversial because of, one, how old they are, and two, how simplistic they are. And it could just be that these are rocks that happen to look vaguely humanoid. There's really no way to tell. They haven't found any specific use of tools or anything like that shown on them. This one could be possibly up to 500,000 years old, which makes it extremely controversial because there are no other depictions of human artistic expression that are that old. So, and the same with this one over here. They're very, very controversial, but still cool to look at. One of them, this one, was actually found within layers of volcanic ash. So that was how they figured out how old it was. This is the last time the volcano had erupted. This is a mask that was made by Neanderthal man about 33,000 years ago, or it's a mask. People think that it is. But it's basically just a piece of rock that was carved to somewhat resemble the upper half of the face, and a piece of bone was wedged through the middle, and it looks like it represents eyes. But it's controversial to whether the mask was actually made to represent anything at all, or whether or not it does, because it could be, but it could also be random scratchings, and it's very, it's not practical. There's not really any clear use for what they would have used it for. Blombos Cave ochre. These are cool. There's over 8,000 pieces of ochre that have been recovered from these caves in South Africa, and many of the stones have really intricate carvings and things on them from more recent years. But some of them are over 70,000 years old, like this one. And you can see it's just kind of random diamond-shaped scratchings. So some of the really, really old ones are, it's unclear whether or not they were early abstract representations or if they were just random scrapings. So in conclusion, when we think about our ancestors, we often think of humans that have been living in functioning civilizations for a little while or just developing them. But we don't often think about our origins, where we came from. And when we do, we don't attribute them to coming up with much other than discovering fire or painting in a cave. But really, they did, and it's where it all came from, and it came slowly. But artistic expression was one of the founders of early thought, curiosity, ingenuity, and development in human beings. And I just thought that was really, really interesting. So that was what I did my presentation on. And thank you for listening. I don't think I can turn it off. Oh, God.